Hello, it's Michelle again. So back again to talk about the Plum Bayou Mounds research and what we already know about the site. I told you we'd work from this book, so I'm gonna go through chapter 1 today, which is the environmental and cultural settings of the site. So we'll talk a little bit about what the site looks like and kind of the background of the environment as it was when the people at Plum Bayou were there, using it, building it, those kinds of things. I know last time I talked about the site being dated to the terminal late woodland period, but I don't think I actually told you what those years are, and so that's about 650 to 1050 CE, so Common Era. That's the main time that the site is occupied, but it is starting to be built prior to that, and we'll talk more about that in other chapters of the book. And then it, I think, continues to be used a little bit through time, past when its prime is at 1050. But again, we'll get to all of that. Today we're gonna go with chapter 1, which is this in the book. So basically it's just kind of laying out where we are, what the site looks like. So first off, the site is about 42 hectares, which is about 103 acres. So it's a pretty big site. It's on the alluvial floodplain, which just means that it is like the flood zone of what was the Arkansas River. The Arkansas River is still there, obviously, but this is in the floodplain of that. So floodplains are good places to live in that when rivers flood, they bring up really good nutrients for planting and, having crops and stuff. And that's why still that's a really good region of Arkansas to plant in. We have a lot of farms in that region, but it's also a little bit dangerous because it floods, right? And if you were living there and it flooded, that would be a problem for you. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in this chapter. And so I'll show this map probably a couple of times, and we'll see how good my YouTube and video editing skills are. I'll try to just get this picture on the screen. So 42 hectares. It is located along Mound Pond, which is a oxbow lake of the Plum Bayou. So a bayou, slow-moving little river that's been cut off usually from a bigger river. So the Arkansas River is down in this region. And Mound Pond is, if you've ever been there, you've seen it. So that's this whole space back here. On the other side of Mound Pond now is a subdivision. People live back there. And then the park is on the other side of it. So when I hold this up, you can see the north arrow here. So this is north. So the site in general, as you saw on this map, there are 18 mounds. The biggest mound is Mound A, which is right there on the lake. Or on the pond, Mound Pond. It is 15 meters tall, which is about 45 feet tall, so it is very, very big. And then Mound B is right up here, kind of north of that, of A, and it is 11.5 meters tall, which is about 34 and a half feet tall. And then Mound C is kind of out here, and it is 4 meters tall, which is significantly less than those two really big mounds that are there. And so 4 meters is about 12 feet. And the rest of the mounds were probably only ever about 1.5 meters tall, so only about 3 to 5 feet tall. And so they were plowed over at different times in the past as well. So a lot of them, you'll see on here again, you can see them on the site if you're doing really careful mapping. If you're out there really, really looking for them, you can see some of them. Some of them you can't see, I think, at all anymore, just from the ground surface. But you can see different ones in different ways. And then the other built thing on the site is the embankment wall around the entire site. And there's also a ditch outside of that embankment wall. The embankment wall has 4 openings. 2 of them you can see on the map, here and here. And the other 2, I believe, are at the ends. Again, the embankment wall is not super tall, but it was built up. The top ditch was a drainage, a natural drainage that was there, but the bottom part of the ditch was dug out by the Plum Bayou people. And so they probably just wanted a ditch, utilized that natural drainage up at the top, and then had to had to dig it out at the bottom part. So that's kind of what the site looks like in a very, very general sense. Okay, so those are kind of the built up areas. But then there are also 2 plaza areas, which are kind of just areas that were left open or maybe had things on them. We haven't done a lot of excavation in the plaza, so we don't totally know, but typically a plaza is an open space. And so there's a big plaza here that's surrounded by those big mounds, and there's kind of, you can kind of see how they surround a big section there. And this part of the site is a little bit higher than this other part. But there are, you can see some mounds here as well on this other side, and there is an open area here too, so there seem to be 2 plazas. Like I said, there's not been a ton of work in the plazas as far as I'm aware so far. We'll get into it more in the book. So I think that we don't know a ton about what was there necessarily, but we know that there don't seem to be any mounds there or any remnants of mounds in those plaza areas. And we do know that at other woodland period sites, there are plaza areas that are just big kind of empty spaces for people to gather. So that's kind of what we know about the actual built site setup. But what do we know about the environment kind of at large? This site seems to be in a good location because it's right on a lake or a little pond, right? So we've got some immediate like fish, birds that will be in there, turtles, things like that. So immediately useful. It's in a floodplain like we talked about, so good soils for growing things. And it's within 25 kilometers or about 15.5 miles of 4 different kind of landforms in Arkansas that provide some different resources. So the first one is the Ouachita Mountains to the southwest. And those, obviously, mountains, we're looking at a good stone source. And so people were making stone tools, so a place to get stone is ideal. But it's also an upland area where you're gonna have hardwood forests and also shortleaf pine forests. So a good wood source as well, but also a good source of animals for hunting. So you're definitely gonna have deer, squirrels, raccoons, all the other kind of associated forest animals. And then we are in the Arkansas River Valley. We already talked about being an alluvial plain of the Arkansas River. So you're nearish to the river itself, which is a place that you can travel. You can use all of these waterways, not just big rivers, but smaller ones as well, with smaller boats, smaller canoes, to get from different places to different places. So the Arkansas River would be a main source of travel. And then the other bayous and streams and things would be as well. And then also, again, animals. So we'll have fish, we'll have birds, we'll have the other kind of aquatic associated animals that could be hunted and eaten and things like that. We are also near the West Gulf Coastal Plain. Man, that is hard to say. And that is a lowland grass prairie. And so again, so you'll have grasses available for making thatch roofs for houses and buildings and things like that. Those are really good to keep interiors dry. And then also all of the animals that would be associated with that. Slightly different than what you'd have for woodland animals. So again, just more resources available within those 15 miles. And then we're also in the Arkansas lowlands, which is kind of the back swamps and the slow draining areas. And those are not quite so good for a lot of things, but they are kind of interconnected waterways. So again, traveling around. And also because they are quite wet, you'll get migrating birds going through there. You'll have turtles, you'll have those kinds of aquatic resources as well. And so definitely not all bad by any means, but also quite a lot of mosquitoes, so not all good either. But that just kind of gives you an idea of like why this site would be here, why people were living in this region. It was kind of central to a lot of things that you could easily get to if you lived in one of those other regions, which also people did and have and still do. But you would have to go farther to get to some of the other things because they're kind of in all directions around. So the Gulf Coastal Plain is to the east. Like I said, the Ouachitas are to the southwest. So we've got things kind of spread in different areas. If you go different directions, you can get to different types of resources. We also, in the Arkansas River Valley, I didn't mention, in the river itself, there's a lot of gravels. And gravels are often good for making small immediate stone tools. So you don't have to travel and get the bigger chunks of rock from the Washtas. You could just pick up smaller gravels and make something kind of a little more quickly and easily from the stuff that has washed down from northern states from very far away, potentially. Right near where you are. So a lot of good resources in this area and a lot of access to resources in this area, which is why people would have chosen to live here. And then looking at the cultural settings, I've got, and I'll put a link to where it is on our website. It's a downloadable PDF. We have our Native American dateline, and basically we have evidence kind of in central Arkansas that goes all the way back to the Dalton period, which is 8500 BCE, which is almost as far back as we have anything dated in Arkansas. So people have been living in this region or traveling through this region, at least spending short amounts of time here, for thousands and thousands of years. So people were around. And even when Plum Bayou is an active site, people are living in small villages nearish to it, but there are people living further afield as well. That's part of what we're going to try to get to at the training program this summer, is what did life look like at these small villages around the site, kind of in the immediate vicinity of Plum Bayou Mounds. But then we do also know from other research that's gone on at different survey stations and potentially in different training programs that the Survey and Society have done through the years, that people in this time period, in this late woodland period, were living all across Arkansas. We have evidence of that. And at Plum Bayou specifically, kind of in this book, we know that life didn't completely stop at Plum Bayou at 1050 and everybody moved away and disappeared. Like, there's no more evidence for building of mounds after that, but we do find a little bit of early Mississippian type pottery at the site, and then we definitely have later Mississippian, late Mississippian, and even contact period sites nearby in the central Arkansas region through time. So people didn't completely leave the area when they stopped building at Plum Bayou Mounds, but we don't see them using the mounds very much anymore, and they're not building any new mounds after that point. So I think that's kind of where we're gonna stop for today. That's chapter 1. I think chapter 2 and 3 kind of start to talk about like how the park was formed and some of the research agendas for the book. So I might kind of combine those together into a video and talk about the history of that kind of a little bit more quickly, and then it starts to dive into like the individual mounds and what we know about different areas of the site. So we'll talk about that in kind of the coming up weeks. Again, any questions you have, ask down below. I've had some good questions already. I've been trying to kind of answer them as we go or note them so that I can talk about them the next time, or like when that comes up in the topics and the chapter topics. So thanks for watching. Hope to see you soon. I'll see you in a couple weeks with another video, and then hopefully I'll see you in June at the training program. So, all right, bye.